your first of these speakers in your leadership series. I mentioned, at least I intimated to Karen early on, that if you're starting here, at least you have nowhere to go but up. But I'm happy to be the first one, and honored that you asked me to be. One of the things that most of you have probably already heard me say this, but I'll repeat it. Even though I was never an elected neighborhood council board member, I do consider myself to be a product of the city's neighborhood council system. And I do so because of the years I've spent working with the neighborhood councils, some individual neighborhood councils and some of the Lank, Vank, Hank groups of neighborhood council coalitions over the years. So I consider myself fairly familiar with the neighborhood council process, although, as you know, when you work inside City Hall, and I include the commission as well, you learn so much more about the entity that you're working with that no matter how close you felt you were to it before or how much time you spend even covering it as I did, there's still a great deal to learn. I am a strong believer in the neighborhood council system. I think there's a reason that other large city governments are looking at what we have done in Los Angeles. But by saying that, it is not at all lost on me that the neighborhood council system certainly has room for improvement, just as we have a lot of room for improvement inside City Hall as well. And so, Karen, I think maybe to get to your questions, and Karen kind of helped me along with sending me a list of questions that you all would like for me to touch upon, starting with what my approach is to leadership. And I was asked that question quite a bit during the campaign for mayor. And I really do believe, and I've had the opportunity to continue doing this in my current position, my approach to leadership kind of generally is to empower others. But I think doing that also means that sometimes you should not be afraid, even if you feel like hesitating, because a position that you believe in might not be the most popular position. Well, if you believe in it, you take that position anyway. And one of the things that I think also is the mark of a successful leader is someone who has a very open mind. And by having an open mind, I don't mean that you're just willing to hear the positions of others, but you have the courage to actually change your mind. In the world that we all work in, oftentimes, if you change your mind on something, there's always somebody to call you a flip-flopper. Because I would always argue with, no, that's a flip. There was no flop. There's a flop if you switch more than once, which can sometimes happen on things. But I would always argue when people would say, well, haven't you changed your mind on that over time? Didn't I hear you say that you were you felt this way on this issue, but today you feel that way on this issue? And to answer the question, I would always go back to making a point of advocacy. If I stand up in front of any community group, in front of any city commission, in front of the city council, or even as I did for many years in front of a court of law, I'm trying to convince people that might not otherwise agree with me to see the position that I'm supporting. So I'm, in essence, asking them to change their mind. So if I'm going to ask them to have an open mind and ask them to change their mind, why would I criticize someone for doing it? So it always amazed me when some folks that I would consider people that I dealt with in the media, particularly in the mayoral campaign, when they would want to be critical of any number of issues where leaders had taken the opportunity and taken the time to study it further, that they would somehow be criticized for that. So I think that my approach is to empower others within the description that I've just provided. I also think that there are lots of challenges. One of the questions that Karen sent over, in my role at the Board of Public Works, what do I find challenging in my efforts to move our goals forward? Well, the most challenging thing is the size of the city bureaucracy itself. Yes, that's maybe the easiest and most obvious answer, but it does pose the greatest challenge. But what that doesn't mean is that you should just give up on it. It can take weeks, months, sometimes it takes years to get something done inside City Hall. And because it takes so long doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. Sometimes because it takes so long, that's the very reason that it should be done. And change takes time. And one of the things that, and it's often frustrating, one of the things that I've learned I'm now, I guess, in my 9th month in office. I tracked the mayor's term, but I'm 1 month behind. He started July 1st and appointed me at the end of July. But that is that oftentimes city employees, not to be critical, it's just a fact, that people who have been entrenched in the departments for a number of years have gotten very accustomed to the way that they feel like they've always done things. And I think that the way that things are done can often change with a political tide, but oftentimes a mayor stays 8 years. Council members, at least 8 or 12 years. So it's not a 30-year, although there are a lot of city employees that have been there 30 years, but there's people get entrenched because I talk to folks about, and I hear it often, well, that's the way we've always done it. And when I inquire further, well, when did you start doing that? Well, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. So they started doing it 5 or 6 years ago in the last term of a mayor, and it's going to take some work to change. But unless you're willing to challenge what you think needs to be changed, you're just going to submit to the status quo. There are a number of examples I could provide. We are currently working on, some are going to take longer than others. In Public Works, we are working on reforming the city's contract process. Now that is no small task. Now it's also something that I didn't necessarily expect to undertake when I knew I was taking this job. I did expect to be facing the street funding mechanism, or at least some measure of it, that we are going to be talking about tomorrow night. And by the way, I do remind myself, we have a public meeting tomorrow night, kind of an interactive town hall, if you will. It's taking place tomorrow, 6 o'clock in City Hall in our Public Works Chambers, room 350 in the main City Hall building. From 6 o'clock to really whenever, I think it's calendared from 6 to 9 p.m., but we're going to go as long as it lasts, to hear from the community and to also share with the community what Councilman Buscaino and Englander and the Board of Public Works and the respective departments that have worked on, and bureaus that have worked on a street funding mechanism to solve the problem of our broken roads and sidewalks, but to provide in summary fashion what 14 months of outreach has resulted in, to discuss and go over with the CAO and the CLA their joint report on the issue, and to also hear from community groups, neighborhood organizations, neighborhood councils, environmental groups that are interested in commenting early on in the what will be a 3 to 4 month process of deciding whether or not this matter goes to the ballot. But that's tomorrow evening, again, 6 o'clock in the Board of Public Works chambers. The other thing that, to solve one of the things I've discovered in solving the problem, when I thought it was an April Fool's joke, actually, when I first started my job, I was definitely in my first week, maybe even my second day. And a couple of folks from the mayor's office that I'd met and got to know fairly well from the campaign came in and told me that that we're going to have 100 mules that are going to walk through the streets of Los Angeles in celebration of the 100th year of the Los Angeles Aqueduct. Now, I thought that was a joke. And we were going to go through all up, near in CD 6 and 7, up near Summerlin, Tujunga, near the Wash and all that, and we're going to march 100 mules through the city. And I thought they were really kidding. Who brings 100 mules and marches them through the city for something like that? Well, come to find out, not a joke. Actually, something that went off quite well. But it went off quite well because I started learning quickly just how many city departments, bureaus, agencies, whatever, I needed to have agreement. We needed to have LAPD. I'm going to see if I can just rattle these off from memory. We needed to have LAPD, obvious reasons, public safety. Needed to have fire. Needed to have street services. Needed to have DOT, Department of Transportation. Needed to have sanitation. Obviously, that's going to be an issue. Animal services. We're talking about 100 mules. And by the way, we also were working with the county because they were going to go in and out of city limits. And so all of these things that were happening, and what do we do in case of rain? And what are time limits that we can do? And blocking off streets and dealing with various community groups, neighborhood groups, business associations. And we didn't have a whole lot of time to do this. So what I did is quickly created a task force and got everybody in the room, face to face. It was a crowded room. But we actually hammered out a plan. And the things that LAPD would crop up that were a concern, bring it now. And let's talk about it now. Street services, DOT, bring them now. And it's amazing how far we got. And so this method of putting people in a room face to face, I am the liaison for the board to the Hollywood, the Walk of Fame repair and maintenance plan. Now, this is, a couple of miles of sidewalk on both sides. That's a special type terracotta. It's a very famous tourist attraction. You all know about the Walk of Fame. Well, we have several agencies that we have to work with, including MTA, because of the subway stops and the bus stops along the way. And we've hit a couple of bumps in the road, and the city's agreement, because the city's not paying for this. All right, you'll be happy to know this is not being paid for by the city taxpayers. The Hollywood Walk of Fame Trust actually pays to maintain and to do the repair work and the maintenance work. But in sidewalk, it's public right of way. If they wanted to thrust it upon us, they essentially could. But they've said, we'll pay for it if you, city, will agree that our permit requests will be handled in an expeditious manner to the extent possible. And that's essentially our end of the bargain. So I'm the liaison on that, and we've run into any number of challenges. You can imagine the challenges that come up with the Academy Awards, the challenges that come up with the premieres and things, and the closure of streets. And the way to solve that problem, and quite frankly, I just copied it from what was a crisis moment that I had on the 100 Mules Walking. I got everybody in the room, face to face, created a task force. And what surprised me was that people actually came up and said that they had never done this. And so to me, it's become kind of a way of solving the problems. We have it's just old-fashioned mediation, is what it is in a lot of ways. We have major issues right now that we're dealing with. Just today, it's the last thing I dealt with before I came over this evening, and will be one of the first things I deal with tomorrow. The Crenshaw LAX transit corridor and the community's concerns regarding the removal of trees. Well, the communities have been involved in many meetings with MTA and some city representatives. And we've gotten to the point now that it's time to start the project. And there's still not a clear understanding of where MTA is coming from, what the city's requests are, and what we can do to go as far as possible within the confines of the budget to make the city whole. But to also bring this $2 billion+ investment to the community. And it has been, I think we've had 3 now of these face-to-face meetings in our conference room with all parties present. So I think that, Karen, while it's often difficult with people's schedules to get as many people in the room as you can, sometimes get everybody. Sometimes it's best to get as many people in as you can, recognizing you can't always have everybody there. But the more people that show up, the more of a priority the other people will discover that it has become. And so that is a leadership tool that has kind of stumbled in my lap, but is consistently proving to be effective. Some issues that I would like to partner with neighborhood councils on. A number of them. One of the things I started doing when I took this job was running around to the neighborhood councils that I talk to. I get frequent invitations to come talk to the neighborhood councils. I always say yes. Rarely do I have to wait until a second month. But sometimes we do just because of conflicts and scheduling with other community meetings. But one of the things I've been asking for, and I've been to Lank and I've been to Vank, I've not been to Hank yet on this one, down in Harbor, but I've asked representatives from all the neighborhood councils that I've spoken to that they create a Board of Public Works liaison or a Department of Public Works liaison. The reason's quite simple, and it was something that actually Lydia Grant and I, and she gets credit for the idea, we were knocking around ways to utilize what do we have now, 2,000 neighborhood council members, just about. We've got 100 neighborhood councils, and you're upwards of 12 to, so between 1,300 and 2,000 neighborhood council members. Those are volunteers for the city. As I knew when I was a broadcaster, if you want to find out what's going on, that's where the answers are. And let's find a better way to utilize their eyes and ears, their expertise, their experience on delivery of city services, which is, one of the key things, obviously, we do in the Department of Public Works. We touch people in the city, whether you live here or work here or neither of the above. If you just pass through the city of Los Angeles, you experience the challenges of our roads, of our sidewalks, of our street trees, engineering, sanitation. So we came up with the idea of a concept of a liaison program where we asked every neighborhood council, you can elect them, you can appoint them, they can volunteer, whatever is appropriate under your rules and your bylaws. I think people probably do different things. I know that, for example, Studio City, Lisa Sarkin said, I'll do it. And so, there's Lisa Sarkin is now the liaison. It's something it's that simple. It's someone that has an interest in the services that Public Works provides. And what we're planning on doing, we're working on a master plan for the liaisons, working with the department. We will have what will be, in essence, an orientation day in City Hall with our complete commission and our bureau heads, so that we can brainstorm, much like a retreat that you talked about, Karen, where we find better ways for the neighborhood councils to work with us in providing our city services. There's been a great one, and this is one of those examples of something I touched on a little bit earlier, about how sometimes it can take forever to get something done in City Hall, but it's a good idea to stay on it. The Neighborhood Blitz. The Neighborhood Blitz is something that was, I don't even know where the idea originated, but it took the new leadership that exists in the Garcetti administration. Quite frankly, it was the mayor himself. When he took office, I think it was the first week when he was in office that we were in Sherman Oaks on the first round of the Neighborhood Blitz. We're in the second round. We're at Neighborhood Blitz 2.0 now. And it was mentioned to me earlier tonight about how beneficial it is. And quite frankly, what we do is the neighborhood council members that live in the community, that live in the neighborhood, tell us where the key potholes are. Right? And it's the ones that they experience every day. And we get a sense of urgency. And when we send our crews out, it tells us where we need to be. So it benefits the city in a number of different ways. It saves the city the staff time of going out and finding them through some study or otherwise. It lets us know, without using any staff money or staff time, where those that have the most urgency exist. So those are some of the obvious benefits, and that will continue through Mayor Garcetti's time in office, I'm confident. But that's something that, while it seems to us as a great idea, I think the implementation of it seemed insurmountable to folks in prior years, and it really wasn't. We all got together and decided to do it, and now it's continuing to grow. So that's just one example. Something else I should mention. Our Board of Public Works, we're taking, like you do with your commission, I would normally try and give you credit and say that you inspire us to go on the road, but I was informed that prior boards of public works have done this. So, I know you have your commission meetings around the community. We're going to do the same thing. And our first one is coming up. We're going to do it quarterly. We may get to the point we can do it every other month, but we're at least going to start quarterly. We are starting in Council District 15, and the meeting is on April 21st, 2014. The second one is July 21st, and that's in Van Nuys. Right now, we are required, of course, to be hooked up to council phone. So we are somewhat limited to locations where they have the technology where we can easily hook up without significant cost. Everybody's got budget issues in the city, of course. So our first year has been scheduled, but those are the first two. Coming up this month in San Pedro at the Port of Los Angeles Administrative Building. The flyer that I have is on our website. Also, one of the things that we envision with liaisons is picking one of the bureaus to focus on. We do the same thing in the Board of Public Works. I have the Bureau of Street Services, Commissioner Barbara Romero, and by the way, on the table we've got some handouts of the five commissioners, a bit of our background, all kinds of information on our bureaus. Very handy and helpful. It's on the table over there. But for years, they've divided up the commission by the five bureaus. I have street services, Barbara Romero has sanitation, Monica Rodriguez has street lighting, Matt Szabo has engineering, and Mike Davis has contract administration. Obviously, when briefings come, if you're the liaison commissioner, you're briefed on every item that relates to that bureau, and sometimes on second ones, there's a second commissioner briefed as well. You can't do three, you've got a Brown Act violation. But oftentimes, two of our commissioners are briefed. So, and I know that I need to get to, I'm sorry that radio is speaking 30-minute segments, but I know I need to get to Q&A. But I do want to say that thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for this invitation. We really are boots on the ground department. We touch every Angelino's life and those beyond. And the best partnership we can have is with the neighborhood councils. So we are excited about the liaison program. We have still not yet filled out the list of Public Works liaisons yet. That will take some time. We know, and we also realize that part of the product comes after elections. You're in election season. So there are a number of neighborhood councils that are waiting until they have their new board in place. We completely understand that. But I would mention that the sooner we get it in place and get the master plan completed, get our orientation underway, it is amazing how much more efficient and effective we can be together. And by the way, part of it is just knowing where to go to and where to start when you have a problem. Whether it's a busted sidewalk or it's a tree trimming issue. We had a homeless encampment issue that Deborah mentioned earlier that actually ends up not being one of our bureaus after all, but you don't know that until you have someone that you can contact. So thank you all for the invitation and for the time, and I have a few minutes for some questions if you want.
Thank you.